Greetings and salutations, all you beautiful people. We are back inside. It's League Unlock. Eric and Mark here with you guys, moving onwards and upwards for some LCK preseason power rankings. I feel like usually there's not as much shuffling going on in the LCK as the other regions, but this year was pretty much every team making big moves.
LCK, welcome to the free agency bonanza, my man. We've been having the paradise party, everybody signing up, getting some cash. LCK included this year in the party festivities.
And the party starts in that bottom three fiesta where, we're kind of breaking this up into a few different categories, but we start with number 10 on the list. And unfortunately, it's the upset kings themselves. We're talking about FREDIT, BRION, who actually made some of the least changes going into this year. The problem is the one change they did make in the top lane with either Sword or Morgan coming over is a downgrade. So
it's not leaving us feeling extremely confident that the progression that we did see from the bros last year is going to continue into anything meaningful for this year. Is unfortunate given those changes, willing to be proven wrong. And for someone even like Morgan, we have seen potential from him before to be more than what was delivered with HANWHA LIIV. The problem, of course, is, well, what was delivered with HANWHA LIIV is where we've most recently been for someone like Morgan and what's going to happen. The bros, not much else to be said. I think very comfortably predicted in last place. But last year, exact same spot from the bros. And you know what? It worked out just okay. Just okay.
Yeah, they ended up 9th instead of 10th, 5 and 13. But hey, okay. Both splits last year, they're always due for at least a win against DAMWON. So it doesn't matter if you place them 10th, they only get one win. They're good for at least for that one win against DAMWON throughout the regular season. Number 9 on the list is the revamped, and by revamped I mean they lost CHOVY and Deft. So we're talking about HANWHA LIIV, and I think the reason that you can put them ahead of FREDIT BRION is because they kept Willer and they kept Vista, who actually were standouts apart from CHOVY and Deft through the gauntlet and even at Worlds.
Yeah, at various points in times, they were the people that you were talking about the most after a victory for HANWHA LIIV, and that's saying something given how, popular players like CHOVY and Deft are, but then not only the performances that we knew from them and how they were able to pop off and carry things for HANWHA LIIV. We were talking Willard and Vista and what they did. For me, Vista was the stronger member of that bottom lane duo for the majority of the year, so keeping him certainly still a positive for HANWHA LIIV. But you can't fill those gaps. I don't care what the names are going to be. It's not going to be the same. And even if you've got the HANWHA LIIV insurance money, it didn't stack up to the way that the rest of the LCK was spending this offseason.
And obviously no one is close to replacing CHOVY. Karras coming in the mid lane. I've actually seen a lot of people saying, man, Karras deserves better than being on this HANWHA LIIV roster. So he does have a moderate amount of hype. He did actually start some games over BDD as that backup on Gen G. So he's one of the up-and-coming young mid laners. I think this is a perfect opportunity for a team with basically no expectations for him to overperform.
A good spot to finally see him in more of a starting spotlight, right? As you mentioned, having some times where he did start instead of BDD and performed more than okay, but absolutely going to be a year of cutting his teeth out for this on this roster with the HANWHA LIIV eSports.
And, some of the games might be like pulling your teeth out if you're watching some of these HANWHA games. But currently sitting in that number 9 spot for them. Number 8, lots of moves for LIIV SANDBOX coming into the 2022 season. Basically, only Kroko is the returning starter. One player coming from 2021. You have Dove, who's role swapping to the top lane. The bot lane of Envy and Kale are coming over from Gen G Challengers, so you have that built-in synergy that they played all of last year together. And then the big name is, of course, Clozer there's no questions, will he start, won't he? He will be starting for LIIV SANDBOX.
Finally, the Clozer era begins for LIIV SANDBOX. And the bigger one for me is yes, clearing that room for Clozer to be that starting mid laner. Is Dove moving over to the top side? Can we see Dove find some of that success that Xiaohu did last year in the LPL, swapping over for RNG? to say that Dove is not the same caliber or same proven player that Xiaohu was when he made that change? Yes, that's very accurate. But absolutely, is it fair to say that Dove provided some good excitement last year and some strong level of play, stronger than the rest of LIIV Sandbox? Yeah, he really did. And so to see him making that type of move and what type of opportunity that opens up for the team, for the organization, bringing Clozer in, I'm relatively excited, cautiously excited about LIIV Sandbox heading towards this year.
Perks in 2019, depending on your viewpoint, either improved or broke the game with the rule swap to 80 carry, because every year since, there's been at least one, more often than not two, major role swaps in multiple regions. You could talk about Xiaohu going top lane, Bwipo going to jungle, Dove is a smaller one going top lane, now we got Fudge going mid lane. It's just a common occurrence now across all major regions.
And there has to be a middle ground to it, you know. There's not everybody is going to adapt as well as Perks did, as well as Xiaohu did. But I think at the same time, it was important to have those happen and to see that success come through, to have people like ourselves and the rest of the community be more open to seeing these type of transitions, these type of changes in a player's career and their role. Hey, let's bring it on into the LCK.
Let's bring it on. We'll see how Dove does with LIIV Sandbox. Currently got them in that number 8 spot. Now we advance to what I'm going to call the playoff hopefuls. This is the main contenders for probably the bottom 3 or bottom 2 playoff spots. And we start at number 7. It is a team that wants to forget 2021 summer even existed. It's DRX. It was a 2-16 run, and this was when we were expecting them to be more competitive for a playoff spot. Absolute disappointments across the board. Piosik is pretty much the main returning player, Kingen as well, I guess, coming for that top side. And then the bot lane is the most exciting change. Deft is reunited with his old squad and Piosik teammate, and BERYL coming over. The bot lane is the most exciting part for me on this roster.
DRX last year, we had, relative levels of excitement and breaking of people's expectations from them during the spring split, which all came crashing down for the summer into that record, as you mentioned before. And everything else being negative, flipped around for this year upcoming with the, as you mentioned, the returning players being the ones that I think anybody would have looked at that lineup and said, yes, I want to see more from these guys. They have potential still to deliver. And as you mentioned, that bottom lane coming through, Deft and BERYL, it is time to see what these two veterans have got in store for us with this DRX lineup.
And it's great fitting them in with Zika, Piosik, and Kingen. Kingen's been around for a while now, but still, the veteran presence of Deft and BERYL is going to be huge for the younger players on this squad. Zika is the main question mark for me, and can he compete in the most stacked position that there is in the LCK? If he's even more than serviceable, then they could make playoffs, I think.
I think that's going to be the real question, because everything else about this DRX team, I have confidence in being able to compete into that territory, as you mentioned, for playoffs in the LCK and what they can get. The problem is if Zika's not performing up to that level, and unfortunately for him, it's the hardest task in probably all of League of Legends eSports, is being a mid laner in the LCK, and a mid laner in the LCK for a team that is hoping to be in the playoffs. Unfortunately, that's the way it's going to go. That is going to be the big deciding factor for me if we are seeing this DRX team climb into the playoffs.
Yeah, that's going to be the tricky part, although they will have the help of a Porsche sponsorship, and that was their kind of team media day. They all drove up in Porsches and got their own entrance coming out. 7th place team in the LCK is getting sponsorships with Porsche, Mark.
Hey, you know what? Let's think about the environment over here, guys. We got the LCS. We got guys rolling in Hondas all together in the bus, in the van. We got one Porsche for each member of the team of DRX? Come on.
That ain't it. That ain't it, DRX. That's the reason why you're number 7 and not number 6. Because number 6 on the list is occupied by a roller coaster. We're talking KT ROLSTER. Haven't made playoffs in a little while, and this was a full revamp. We heard that they were going to spend a whole bunch of money this offseason. They didn't get the big names. You kind of, you go through your checklist, you go through your S and your A's. It feels like they got solid B pluses across the board when you go through this roster that's Rascal and Cuz being reunited, Aiming and Life in the bot lane, and Arya coming over from DFM. That's the big, exciting one to see how he could stack up in the LCK.
We just came off talking about how Zika was going to do against the rest of the mid laners, and this is one of the ones, the newcomers, that you're going to have to deal with, and one that I think everybody expects to be in that conversation of the ones competing at the top level in the LCK. Arya making that transition over from DFM going to be very exciting. And the other one is, as you mentioned, yeah, you're adding in kind of B+, A- tier players that you're looking in free agency, but all of them combined, pretty solid roster still for KT ROLSTER, and as you mentioned, a team that hasn't been in the playoffs in the last little bit. These players all together, this power, this is a playoff level roster for KT ROLSTER.
Yeah, I think if they don't make playoffs, it's a disappointing split for them, even if they're sneaking in that number 6 spot. Noah and 5kid are the only returning players from last year, and Aiming's definitely going to start over both of them. So there's really no returning starters. It's a blank slate for KT, but still, playoff aspirations should be the goal for them. Playoff aspirations and beyond should be the goal for Nongshim, who's in at number 5. Another huge revamp. We know there was all this drama between T1 and DAMWON, some poaching. Where's Kana going to end up? But the roster ended up with Kana, Dread, BDD, Ghost, and Effort. And I think right away you and I are both going to agree the biggest question mark here is Dread. But this is an opportunity for him to maybe say, you know what, fresh setting, grass is greener here, away from Afrika. I have 2 of the best solo laners in the LCK. This is a chance for Dread to wash away all those Afrika memories.
Well, he's going to have to, because you're looking at the rest of this lineup, this huge revamp, changing of places, and for the Nongshim squad, which I gotta say, come on, guys, the rest of the LCK, all the Nongshim Red Force did was show up to match day and bring in the Nongshim family of snacks for you guys to have.
They're the real MVPs, yeah.
This is how you repay them? Oh, the poaching and everything else? Oh, done dirty by the rest of the LCK, but focusing in on Dread. Everybody else on this roster, even including Kana during his short, rookie year with T1, we've seen them. They've had some proven levels of success and experience. Dread has not had a lot of proven success, I think, as we could say, with the Afrika Freaks. In order for this roster to work out, for them to achieve the levels of success that I think the goals for not only the individual members, but for the organization should be, Dread is going to have to find some of that success with this team. To be fair to him and to give him a little bonus, it's going to help when your mid laner is BDD.
And BDD going to be the consistent force for them. If Kana plays like he did at the end of 2021, this should be higher than a 5th seed. Effort, remember, LIIV SANDBOX had great moments and were close to finishing 1st in the summer split. Effort was a lot of that reason. And seeing Ghost away from DAMWON, hopefully he can destroy some of these haters who said he got carried the whole time he was on that squad. Now we hit the top 4, and I'm calling the Afrika Freaks like ahead of playoff hopefuls and right below contenders. They're the kind of jumping point.
Exists in that little bubble pocket between some of these bigger groups that we get to talk about in the LCK. But make no mistake, the Afrika Freaks, part of that crew of teams in the LCK that opened up the wallets, opened up that checkbook, and said, we got to make a push to be in that top tier. Just short of that very elite tier for us in the LCK, but good enough for number 4 on our list of their Afrika Freaks.
And they fall into the same list of, if you're not BDD, Faker, CHOVY, or Showmaker, I got a question mark about your mid laner. That's the same with Fate, just because he's not one of the big 4. But the trio of LM, Teddy, and Hoyt, these are all subs from last year on T1. So they already have this built-in inherent synergy for being on the same squad, and they can kind of say, hey guys, now we're the unquestionable starters on this squad. They don't have that looming, will I be benched, will I be starting, hanging over them.
And then the real question for me is going to be about what is the power, what's the meta going to read through the LCK for a team like the Afrika Freaks, where if it is a bottom lane focused meta, where if you're getting a lot of value from your ADC, Afrika Freaks jump right into that elite tier for me because of who they have down in the bottom lane. Teddy and Hoyt, as we've talked many times before, not just bringing in Teddy, but being able to get Hoyt alongside him, the synergy that should be built in there, the chemistry, the rapport, just even knowing each other from the T1 organization days gives you a bit of a head start compared to many other teams and the changes that they've had to make to their bottom lanes. Going to be a very interesting year watching the Afrika Freaks and seeing just how powerful they are and where they stack up compared to the rest of our group that we just talked about, looking to make their spot in the playoffs, and the ones ahead of us that we're going to get to talk about where it's championship or bust.
I think this offseason more than any, you're right, you have to put extra points on guys that have built-in synergy or have played together last split, because there's so many changes, full 5 players that haven't played together on a lot of these rosters. So Afrika has some of that built in. Keen should be happy. Looks like he's got a pretty solid going roster for 2022. Now we get to the big boys, the contenders. I think it's pretty much a consensus who the top 3 are heading into 2022 in the LCK. There's going to be a lot of debate on where those teams are situated, I think. We're going with number 3 because it's the biggest changes. There are still some question marks. We're talking about Gen G, the dubbed super team. I know CHOVY and Ruler together. How can you possibly put them 3? Doran, LIIV, and CHOVY have all played together, but it's been a few years. It's still a brand new roster. We're going tempered expectations.
I want to be careful because the last time I put a ton of expectations and a ton of excitement into Gen G with Peanut on the roster,
that didn't go so well.
Let's just say I didn't get my value back on any of that investment with Gen G. I feel, and this might just be, me being stupid, which, that's happened a couple times. This could be the year for Gen G to finally be at the very top of the LCK, but I want to be cautious to start out the year, and that's why they find themselves at number 3. So many changes, drastic changes, big-time changes on this Gen G roster, but there is no mistaking that the elite power, the elite skill set, it's all there, baby.
I'll preface these top 3 by saying I think, don't be surprised, any 3 of these are favorites to win an LCK title. They're all very close, and I think they're all a clear tier above the other 7 teams in the LCK. So they're even though it's going to be 1, 2, 3, they're very close, and Gen G looks like an absolutely insane team, especially love to see Score coming back. Don't know how he's going to fit in as a head coach, but just excited to see him back in the scene. And Gen G looks exciting. They needed to do a revamp. This is the fullest of revamps, and CHOVY and Ruler should be an absolutely lethal dual carry threat throughout the entirety of the LCK. So very excited about Gen G, and having them 3rd is not sleeping on them. They're still in the contender category. As we move on to number 2, where things, again, there's going to be debate who you want to put in that number 2 spot. There was still, despite keeping the core of Canyon and Showmaker, a lot of movement around the Rift and around the roster for DAMWON, and I think you look immediately, BERYL is a clear downgrade from Khan. You can't argue that, I don't think. You can say Dom and Kellen is a better bot lane as a 2v2 than Ghost and BERYL were, but I think we're going to notice how much this roster is going to miss BERYL's shot calling and leadership on the Rift.
There's a lot of things looking at the 2022 upcoming season for DAMWON. Kia, as you mentioned, still retaining Canyon and Showmaker, the big key signings for them in the off season. But as mentioned, there's a lot of question marks in what we're going to see from them compared to the dominance that we've become accustomed to from DAMWON Kia, whether it was Nuggery in the top side or if it was Khan, the level that someone like that in the top side could provide and how it meant it changed around the map for the rest of the team. That's not going to be there with someone like BERYL in the top lane, which even thinking about how the potential of BERYL and what he can do and how much better he can be than his time on Gen G, it's still hard to imagine him equaling the levels that someone like Nuggery, arguably the top laner in the game, and Khan, one of the legends of the game in the LCK at that role. Hard to see that coming through this year, so certainly a downgrade in that regard. As you mentioned, the bottom lane, one that you think you could look at from Nongshim, Dom and Kellum, and see that they could be an upgrade over what Ghost and BERYL were providing for you. But then it is that question mark, the biggest one, and the one that was so important during the World Championship run, is that shot calling from BERYL, what he did behind the scenes on the mics for the DAMWON Kia and the rest of the players, and how he helped them. Man, he was almost dishing out like command by, every 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah, he's telling players where to aim skill shots.
Exactly. He was doing so much for the squad. So to see him gone, going to absolutely be a very different time for DAMWON Kia and how they get things done.
And there's a chance we see a shift in playstyle because, Khan was getting so much attention. With Docdom coming, they might be throwing a lot more resources. We might see Canyon hanging around bot lane even more.
I don't think many resources were put towards the top side when BERYL was around with Gen G. So
no, just leave him to go 0-7 on Irelia.
I'm predicting that we're going to see much more attention towards the mid lane or the bottom lane than we ever do to the top side for DAMWON Kia in 2022.
Which, again, will be a shift from when we had Khan on that top side for them. So DAMWON in at 2, Gen G in at number 3. That only leaves one squad left, guys. And we touched on, you keep things intact, you keep synergies carrying over into the next year. That's going to be huge for all these roster shuffles going around, which is one of the main reasons why T1 comes in at number 1. 4/5 of them staying the same, and even Zeus getting promoted to that starting spot with Kana leaving. He was already with the squad, has already played games with these guys on the Rift. The built-in synergy that T1 has already, and then you count all the experience that Owner, Gumiyoshi, Kiria are getting. These guys aren't rookies anymore. They're developed. This team should only get better from 2021, a year where they were so close to beating DAMWON, not once, but twice.
All the excitement, all the hype around the changes, CHOVY, Gen G, Teddy to Africa Freaks, it doesn't matter all about that noise, because when it stacks up towards the familiarity that we have with T1, with this roster, with these young players and Faker, and what they did last year, what they built, and what they can build upon that for the next year, that is why a squad like T1 finds themselves at the number 1 spot in our LCK preseason power rankings. Everybody opened up the checkbooks, and it didn't matter. T1 didn't need to open up the checkbooks. Faker says, I got a duty to this organization, to these fans, to get it across the line and lift that Summoner Cup another time. He's coming back. As we mentioned, the young guns alongside him, they're primed and ready to go again. Another year, a year of experience at the very least under their belts now, and that year of experience including trips through the playoffs, LCK, finals, all the way through to the world, the World Championship event. My man, it is a good time to be a T1 fan heading into 2022.
They didn't open up the checkbook for Faker. They opened up the CEO's office and said, Faker, just take a seat. This can be your office, really. We don't care.
They said 5 Porsches for DRX. My man, you can have anything you want. You don't need a Porsche here.
Yeah, we'll get you a jet, my man. You can fly around Korea and anywhere that you want to. But the fact that I think because DAMWON ended up losing to EDG in the World Finals, people kind of forgot how good T1 was, and we were talking about them as potentially World Finalists that could win the whole event.
The battle plans from how T1 managed to push DAMWON Kia to that all-deciding Game 5, which, yes, DAMWON Kia wins against T1. They're not able to get against EDG. So, yes, that is a good point to bring up. That just, the time, how removed we are from that semifinal, that it is easy to forget about just how far and just how close T1 pushed to DAMWON Kia, and then to take a couple steps back from that to see the improvement that this roster made from the other time that they were up against DAMWON Kia and they were 3-1 in that one in the LCK. That is the same core. That is the same core of young players that we've seen grow alongside Daddy Faker. I'm feeling good about T1.
You should be very excited if you're an LCK fan, because you at bare minimum have 3 absolutely stacked looking rosters. But that is it today for League Unlock. Eric and Mark here with you guys. Thanks for hanging out. We'll catch you on that flippity flip.